Hello and welcome to the Radiant Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Caudill. And in today's episode, we're going to be exploring the evolving nature of your inner landscape through an astrological technique called progressions. And so this is an episode for those of you who like to geek out on techniques in astrology. And if you are really serious about learning more in-depth astrology, then this will be the episode for you. It's not too incredibly complicated. Actually, the more that we talk about it, the more that we'll illuminate what progressions are about and why they are so significant. And here to talk about that with me today is astrologer Melissa LaFara from the Energetic Principles Podcast. Hello, Melissa. Thanks for joining me again.
Hello, Christina. Thanks for having me. It's been a hot minute since our massive endeavor of the summit that I joined you for, that you put on. And so I'm glad to be back again and talking about progressions. Just one of my number one, if not number one, tool in my toolbox for predictive work. Yay, progressions!
Woohoo! It's so great. There's so much I want to talk to you about because, I think with astrologers, a lot of times we work kind of in silos and we kind of experiment with things on our own. So I'd love to hear how you've been working with progressions, and I can share a little bit about my own experience. And you are about to teach a class on progressions. So those of you who are interested, definitely make sure that you're staying tuned until the end. And also we'll put the information in the show notes. But just to get us started, just give us sort of an overview on progressions and sort of what do they mean? Because everybody knows that they've got a natal chart that is sort of like the stamp of the moment that where the planets were in the skies and how they related to each other when you were born. That's why we need like that time of when you were born, because that sends the ascendant and the houses and the moon and then all the planets and how they are together. And we usually throughout life, that's sort of the default, all of the moving planets transiting in the sky. The beauty and magic of astrology is how they activate our unique natal chart. And so where do progressions fit in all that?
Yes, good question. So we're doing predictive techniques such as progressions, or even things like transits, or perfections, if you're aware of those things. In my mind, this is how we step the natal chart forward, because we are this stamp that happens at this moment of time that becomes, ingrained in who we are. But if we were just that stamp, we would never grow. There would be nothing ever pushing us or contacting our soul, our spirit, our desires to evolve into something. Which is the whole part of the individuation process. So really, progressions and why they're so unique is that they work in symbolic time. So the main progression that, if you've heard of progressions, you've probably heard of something called secondary progressions, which is the slowest moving progression there is. It takes a lot of time for secondary progressions to do their thing in your chart. But it's this idea of taking a day of your life after birth and it translating to 1 year of life. So really, in progressions, you say, say you were born on January 1st, 1992. Well, say you live to be 90 years old, the next 90 days that happened in real time after the date that you were born is all the progressions, all the secondary progressions of your entire life. So think about that. That's a couple lunar cycles that happen. Venus does some things, Mercury does some things, the sun moves through a few signs, and all this is culminating in symbolic time in your progress chart to your natal chart to represent how you grow and evolve, and what events come into your life too. So I hope does that make sense?
Yeah. Because, I'm a woman of a certain age. I won't say, but I've had my Pluto square and everything. That should give you some kind of hint. But I feel like that, yes, certainly this natal chart that I've been living with my whole life, I didn't even really discover it, go deeply until I was probably in my early 30s anyway, around my Saturn return. But, there's things that are always, it's like you have those aspects that you're like, oh, that, that's like the bane of my existence. But at some point you do end up learning to work with it, So if you go to an astrologer and they're like, oh, you've got like moon opposite your Pluto, you must always be dealing, with these like intense emotional, controlling, demanding experiences. And, I find people in midlife and beyond, especially, they're kind of like, yeah, that was my life when I was younger, but I had difficult experiences. I learned how to deal with that controlling mother or that controlling partner or the blah, blah, blah. So what else, and I feel like as astrologers, if we just think I've only got one way of how these planets relate, it kind of pigeonholes you and you don't get that like really expanded experience of life that is actually possible when you look at, say, your progress chart.
Yes, absolutely. Because the progress chart is something that we grow into. So when you're like, oh yeah, that was something that was in my past, or, and it's always a part of us, like our past is a part of us. Maybe certain progressions will happen at a certain time in our lives where that part of us is challenged, those kind of like chironic situations, even if chiron's not necessarily involved, where we go back to our pain point or we go back to our challenge, and maybe we overcome it, or we have an experience that helps us understand that side of ourselves better. And these are what progressions, especially the lunar phases or the lunar movement in progressions, especially for secondary progressions, because it's the fastest moving element in a progress chart. We can have the moon move through, it takes 2.5 years to move through one sign in the progress chart. So that's a lot of times where we're looking at for activity in that progression. There's lots of other stuff that goes on there too, but say that moon comes back around and it comes to your natal position, which happens when we're about 27 and a half, and then when we're about like 54, 55. If you got opposite Pluto in the natal, you're going to experience that once again. So it's not like all this, it's activated all the time, but the progressions can bring up periods of our life, especially when the moon is involved, that will tap us into these, key natal positions.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I think, at looking at, say, when you cast your secondary progressed chart and you compare it to your natal chart, then like a lot of the planets are in a similar position. All your outer planets and things are typically pretty much in the same position, but it's the personal planets, especially the sun and the moon, that tend to move the fastest. I know that even just, whenever the first thing I look at a progress chart is the moon, because as you said, it's the fastest moving planet and it moves about, what is it, like a degree a month kind of thing. And it's so interesting and it's really fascinating. We're going to get into this too in a minute, that how that moon that, moving around that progress chart, it really triggers things when you compare it to the natal chart. Now, that's one of the first questions I was going to ask you. Do you look at the progress chart kind of as its own chart, or is it in relation to the natal, or both, or how do you tend to use those charts?
Well, with the progress chart, typically it's going to be in a bi-wheel where you'll have two charts and the progress wheel will be on the outside of the natal, and you'll be relating it back to the natal chart. But there's two ways to read progressions by their movements is, when progressions make contacts to the natal chart, that's what's known as progressions to the natal. And then there's progressions to progressions when the progress chart makes a contact. Maybe the moon is squaring Saturn in the progress chart. And then we feel it on a different level. And there's different ways to look at that too, because how is it different from feeling it contact your natal chart, which could, I like the way Bernadette Brady looks at that, where she says when progressed movement is contacting the natal chart, it acts more like a transit. And so in my mind, and that's the beauty of progressions, I will say first and foremost, is that progressions to the minute like the day around the day will give you key event timing. Like it is a timing powerhouse. Like it is, it'll blow your mind how accurate it is. But like a transit, it can bring us something that's very eventful in our lives, or it can bring up situations or desires that are very acute and we're moving towards them, maybe in an outward way. What's interesting that she says in her theory is that she felt that progressions to transits, or excuse me, to natal charts were more like you have desires and you're moving through them, but they're you can compromise them a little, you know, like there's a wriggle room for what will happen, versus progressions to progressions, which she felt, and I feel too as well, is there they also bring up desires and like spiritual energy, but they're a little more concentrated. Like it's almost like there is no wiggle room and you have to do this thing. And you're just, it's almost like a call from, you know, your inner self or your maker to like, I must engage with this energy, or I must go through this experience, or if it's difficult emotional stuff, I must handle this because this is part of, you know, my evolution as a person. So they're both valid, but a little bit different.
Yeah, and it makes me think of like, so I'm a Capricorn, and they always say that Capricorns start out in life really serious. They're serious little kids, you know, and young people, but then they evolve to being like they age in reverse, kind of. And so maybe not in terms of how they look, but in terms of how they act. Like they suddenly, as they get older, they probably realize less and less that you have to be so serious. And I think of that in terms of, so if you were born with a sun in Capricorn, eventually it will, as you age, it could progress into Aquarius, which is a little more, I don't care, you know, and maybe even, you know, maybe late rebelling late or something, or being a lot more eccentric. And then if you're lucky, you know, maybe it'll progress into Pisces, you know, and that sort of mystical side, because they say like with Capricorn, you know, it's, some see the Capricorn symbol as the goat climbing to the top of the mountain, but then there's also the sea goat, where half of it is a fish. And to me, I'm wondering, yeah, the fish tail. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, is that the progressing through life that you finally, like, you know, evolve into a Pisces, you know, if you're lucky to live that long?
I mean, I like that theory too, like, especially since it's the tail, right? You start as the head and then you end up with the Pisces tail. But that's a great example of how powerful, just thinking about, and it's very simple. You know, I mean, progressions aren't necessarily entirely simple, but when we think of them in these terms, especially the solar movement, because think about secondary progressions, it's very much a solar technique, because the symbolic time is a day of life to a year of life. A day is the, you know, sun's motion. The year is sun's motion around, you know, the earth around the sun. And so really, depending on what sign you were when you were born, your sun sign, you are going to go, if you're lucky and you live a long life, you will go through 3 to 4 solar progressions of signs. And, you know, we think about just the archetypes of the zodiac and then how they progress. So like you're saying, with the Capricorn to the Aquarius to the Pisces. And then who knows, if you're a late Capricorn, you could then in your spunky older years become an Aries, you know, Aries sun. And so Capricorn and Pisces can seem like such a different, you know, beast, so to speak. But that's how we evolve into it. It goes back to what you were saying earlier, where it's like, oh, I used to be like this in my earlier life, but I've learned that I'm exploring this now, or this side of me is coming out. You know, I mean, I'm a Cancer. And so us Cancers, we go from Cancer to Leo, which is definitely, you know, a different vibe. I've lived through my Leo solar progression, and then now I'm just in the Virgo zone. I've been in there for about 2 years now. But think about that crab that can be a little, a little insecure, maybe a little shy, more of a homebody. And then all of a sudden you're thrust into Leo territory, and it's like, you need to put yourself out there. Put your creative self on display, be more bold, be more daring, let your sun shine. And, I can say that I grew into that as my expression of my identity, but it's not second nature. It's not natal. It's like you learn to become these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's different from transits, whereas a transit, it's like, you have a temporary opportunity to explore, say like Venus is in Taurus, and like we can explore that side of our chart and maybe get some nice Venus energy there, but then she'll move on and things like that. But then we're kind of stuck with, our Venus in Capricorn or whatever it is. But, when you can look at your progress chart, you're like, and especially if it's the first time you're looking at it, or you haven't looked at it in a long time, and these personal planets, Venus and Mars and Mercury, have all changed signs. And, it's actually really refreshing to know that our internal landscape is, like you said, is evolving in that way as well as our angles too, right? Like the ascendant, the midheaven, all the angles, they also, get a chance to move around. And I remember when my ascendant had just moved into Pisces, because I'm also a Capricorn rising natally. And I was telling friends, like, oh my God, am I going to just totally like gain a bunch of weight and like let myself go and like blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh no, you'll be fine. And I totally did. But it was because of, it was the pandemic and it was menopause all happening at the same time, perimenopause. And so I just couldn't grab a hold of my whole ascendant and my, like taking care of myself and everything, because everything was overwhelming. I think a lot of people felt overwhelmed at the time for many different reasons. But for me, I just felt my life was I was overwhelmed, and I didn't have a sense of my physical self and my physical body and stuff like that. And, but it took me a time to then sort of reorient to that new ascendant sign, to be able to kind of feel my way through it.
Yes. And I love that you bring that up, because it's like, it's not like the sun crosses into a new sign, Mercury crosses into a new sign, ascendant moves into a new sign, and we are this sign. No, there's like a good couple year period where you're like, what is happening here? Why am I feeling this way? Or what? I feel like things are changing, And so there's this orientation process that happens, especially with secondary progressions, because they take so long. And so when, being a Pisces ascendant is definitely not your second nature, especially when you've, been a Capricorn rising and then you've moved through Aquarius rising, which traditionally those are both Saturn ruled signs. You're like, no, I know how to do Saturn. And then all of a sudden mutable water ruled by Jupiter comes around and you're like, excuse me, this is very different. So we have to give ourselves grace with progressions when we move into new territory, because it's exciting about what can unfold, but it is very foreign in nature. And we have to start, be willing to explore what this new energy looks like.
Yeah. And I think people can get stuck in saying, I'm in Aries, so I'm like this, which true, the main premise of astrology is there's these archetypes and we align with these certain archetypes because of when we were born. But I feel like it gives you, like you said, it gives you more grace, especially as you mature through life. And, it kind of gives you permission to be the true authentic you that you're growing into. So yeah, I love all that. And I love variety because it's my Mars and Gemini. That loves variety.
My Mars and Gemini high fives you as well on that. Yes.
And my progressive, because I was born with retrograde Mars and Gemini, and that progressed Mars is still in Gemini.
Yep,
Will not get out of Gemini. It's direct finally. But
that is well, and I love that you bring that up because that's another huge aspect to progressions is when you're born with retrograde planets, when does it go direct? Or maybe you're not born with retrograde planets, but within the 90 days after your birth, Venus goes retrograde, or for most of us, Mercury goes retrograde at some point in our progress chart, and these are huge when they happen. So I feel you. I was born with Mercury in Leo 7 days before it went retrograde in the skies. So when I was 7 years old, it went retrograde in my progress chart. But it went direct in Leo too. And I mean, I am 46 years old still, and it is only halfway through Leo. So my whole life, where my partner, they were born, I feel like, a couple weeks after Mercury had went direct. So he's one of those rare charts where he's actually never going to get a Mercury retrograde in his, unless he lives to be crazy old. But his Mercury is 4 signs away from where it was when he was born. So these are what progressions, as we look at this symbolic time, and just happens to be when were we born, that will bring up these unique characteristics of progressing through life. Because he's gone through a lot of headspaces, right? Where I've just been in the same fixed Leo for so long.
God, I would love for my Mars. I don't think my Mars is ever going to get out of
Mars
Gemini,
is tricky. But yeah.
But so we wanted to talk about some of these really uncanny observations that we've had with progressions. And I know for me, so the progressed moon is so amazing with timing. I mean, if nothing else, paying attention to the progressed moon and how it's aspecting, like you said, your natal planets and the other planets in the progress chart is really amazing. I had, so when my progressed moon was coming up to, let's see, so I natally have a 1 degree Saturn in Leo. And so I had my progressed moon was going through Cancer, and it was coming up to my progressed Cancer was Saturn retrograde into Cancer, right? So, because I was born with a Saturn retrograde. And so I saw that moon coming up, and I was like, oh my God, that progressed moon, it's going to conjunct the Saturn retrograde in Cancer, progressed, and then it's going to conjunct the natal Saturn retrograde in Leo. And I'm like, oh my God, Saturn is never easy. So what is it going to be? And this happened literally when the moon was not just to the degree, but to the minute to these conjunctions. I had gotten a job with, and it was actually hard to get because it was so demanding just to even get the job. But I got a job at a university, and I had a boss who was like a mother figure. She was very much a Saturn in Cancer. And she really helped me because I'd never worked in such a huge organization before. And but I was like, oh God, what's happening with this moon coming up to Saturn? And so the day that the moon conjunct the Saturn, she told us in the office that she was leaving. And she was like our mama bear, it was all women. And she was the much older, experienced woman, but very caring, very caring. She actually is a sun in Cancer, and she actually has the same birthday as you, July 9. Not year, but the same birthday. And I was devastated, and I was like, oh, that was like so heartbreaking. And then when the progressed moon actually reached my natal Saturn, was the day, her last day was the day she left. I was like, what? I mean, to the minute. So you just it's like they say, you can't make this stuff up, but it's like, I knew it was coming, and I was like, what? But This is the thing. As astrologers, we know sometimes we dread these things. Like we're like, oh my God, there's something coming. And we might have dread, like that ambulance that I hear.
Like the siren going by.
Yep. Siren going by. But we also know sometimes it's not worth dreading because we don't always know how it's going to show up. I mean, because what was happening too was I was responsible for this big campaign, and I was like, oh my God, Moon Saturn, I'm going to fail. That's what it sounds like. But actually, I didn't fail. What was the Saturn thing was her and her having to leave and things like that. And that was, it was a bummer. It was a downer. It was bittersweet. I was happy for her. She was going on to something bigger and better, which may be the Saturn and Leo kind of, archetype for her. Cause that Saturn is actually in my 7th or 8th house, depending on the house system. So it's, that not just because she wasn't just a boss, she felt like a friend, like someone that like really cared. And so that's just one, but it's like there is just no getting around it. That moon is there to show us something.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, think about it happening first in Cancer, right? And then, being a Capricorn rising, that natally, that's the 7th house. And, this person is they have the authority figure vibe of Saturn, right? But they were an equal, a partner, someone like a best friend. It's a very 7th house situation. And then it crosses over, right? Because that's a big threshold too. It's not just that moon moving from Saturn at the end of Cancer to then Saturn at the beginning of Leo, but that moon also had to move into Leo. And then that's regardless if, Saturn's there or not, that's a big shift that's felt. And then, you're in 8th house territory by whole signs. And then that's when the change actually happens, from decision, communication, deciding factor to the change itself. And what's really remarkable about all this is, like you said, it's to the minute. Like that, when you have you need to have an accurate birth time. Let's just reiterate this. And a lot of times people do rectification from chart to charts through progressions because they are so reliable to the day that we have the progression, a day on it, a day before it, a day after it, that we can actually rectify charts that way. But so when you see a prominent progression, okay, well, this is a hotspot period. What is this going to look like? And, my partner just had a very poignant experience in progressions just, a few days ago, because they were born with a Libra moon, and their Libra moon is ruled by Venus in Capricorn, who is exactly square this Libra moon to the minute. Like it's the tightest partile square you can get. So here his secondary progressed moon is rolling around to Aries, and I'm like, oh honey, just so you know, that moon is going to make a T-square with your moon and then square your Venus. So just know that when that happens, it's going to set off a pattern, right? Because he's already got moon squaring Venus, and then the secondary progressed moon is going to challenge his moon and then also square Venus. So it's not just for you, like if you have a moon, do you have a moon Saturn contact in your chart?
Not, they're square by sign, but it's pretty wide.
But not like tight. Yeah.
Not tight.
So, yeah. So what you experienced, Stell, was very activating and event-based oriented. And then even more so, it can be an event can really strike a person with their own natal configuration when the moon then activates something that they were born with. So here he has the progressed moon in Aries in the 5th house, that Libra moon natally in the 11th house of friendships. 5th house is that creative expression and your joy and doing the things that you love and you are able to express yourself. Venus, just as an archetype, also is about relationships and joy. And he had been in this band that he was traveling back and forth for like the last year, right? When we think about leading up, right? The leading up of the progression. and he just was not having any fun. And the group that he was in wasn't doing things quite how he wanted to, and they weren't really getting anywhere. And sure enough, the very day that it's progressed moon opposite the natal moon, from the 5th to the 11th, he was out of the band. Like, he got kicked out of the band, basically. And he felt so much relief because, you know, a lot of times with oppositions, we're dealing with other people too. And so he felt so much relief from that. But in the couple days afterwards, because the progressed moon is now squaring his Venus, which is like a couple minutes after his natal moon, and that happens tomorrow. During this little time period, as he's processing leaving this band that he really wanted to be a part of, he's feeling the relief, but he's actually really processing that he's feeling happy about it, which he doesn't necessarily feel happy in life. He's got Saturn on the ascendant, bless his heart. But so he's coming to terms with his own natal configuration of not being satisfied, not being happy. And even though there's this challenging event that kicked him out of something that he once wanted to be a part of, he's realizing that he's getting his joy, the Aries, to do his own thing, the 5th house energy, the realizing, you know, Venus in the 2nd, what it is he truly values, and being aligned with that. So that, you know, I laugh. I'm like, that's progressions at their finest. It's like, and I told him this months ago, I'm like, wait for this day, because this is the key indicator. So we know the situation's coming, but when does it turn around? And that's what progressions do.
Okay. And so you recently told me something like that when you look at the hierarchy, when it comes to things like, you know, if you want to call them predictions or how things kind of events unfolding, you look at progression first and then transits later. Is that correct? Like transits in the natal?
Yes. That's, yeah. My first go-tos is looking at progressions. Perfections too, but we're not talking about that here today. But progressions is
and solar returns. But we'll
yes.
One of these days we'll have to do a full on, like, you know, if you wanted the full 360 picture, start with solar return, then perfections, then progressions, then transits. But for this discussion, because we can have a transit that's looking like, oh my God, you know, like Saturn squaring my sun, and then nothing really happens. Or you're looking and I don't have many tough transits this month, and then things just get set off. Yes. And it's like, maybe I should have been looking elsewhere, like your progressions.
100%. Yes, because that's the tricky thing about transits is like, yeah, say you have a transit coming up and Saturn is going to square your Venus. But maybe by progressions, you know, you're going through a moon Venus trine. And there is just this developing flowing energy with what the archetype of Venus means to you. And maybe Saturn comes around and triggers it a little bit. And there is maybe there's a little difficulty that comes with it, or some self-reflection or some activation. You know, a lot of times squares are just activation of what an archetype is. And then maybe that activation helps us integrate it easily because the progressed moon is then trining with that planet. Or maybe that progressed moon has nothing to do with that planet and that comes around and you don't have a perfection there either. And so the transit can kind of fall flat because there's not these larger hierarchies of planetary archetype or aspect configuration that's going on that the transit can then activate, because essentially that's what the transit's doing. But now say you got a moon, say you're having, like Christina had, say you're having the progressed moon conjunct your natal Saturn, and that's happening also while you're going through your Saturn opposition. Well, you can bet that transit's going to be supercharged with Saturn energy, because that progressed moon is then being activated by transit Saturn while it's activating Saturn. So these are like the nuances that are very important when understanding transits. Well, obviously progressions too, but you know, why are some transits crazier than others.
Well, I will say, I'll reveal that during that time I said with the moon, progressed moon on my natal Saturn, I was also having transiting Pluto opposite my natal Saturn, right? Pluto just getting into Aquarius. And, you know, that's a long, I mean, it's just now, knock on wood, getting out of orb of that. But that was a good 3-year period. And yes, I was also having my eye on when Mars was in that configuration, because that also lit things up. But it was interesting that the moon, you know, had that very, very precise. And I would say that was like that was probably the experience of that whole transit that actually made a whole difference to me personally, because it was like me having gone from feeling safe and that I could rely on this person who was kind of like my guide and my mother figure, to boom, I was in my Saturday Leo. It's like, okay, you're on. It's all about you. Like I didn't have that protection anymore. And Pluto often also can bring loss and stuff like that too. But again, you know, that Pluto, you know, took a few years for that whole thing to go over, you know, opposite my Saturn, then retrograde again, then go over it again. So you look for those faster moving planets and things like progressions to kind of show you when these moments in time that, you know, will really activate that whole picture.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great example.
All right. So now what you are about to teach is a course on tertiary progressions, which is not something I know too much about. I know that in my software, AstroGold, I can only choose, actually, I looked on the app the other day. I can only choose secondary progressions, but on the app on my laptop, I have the opportunity to choose secondary and tertiary. So give us an idea about the tertiary progressions and why they're important.
Yes. So what are these other progressions when we talking about secondary progressions? There is on the AstroGold app, if you do have it, you can look up tertiary and minor charts, I believe, because I've done it. It's just a little, it's nestled in like a different sort of drop down kind of thing. So it is available, but so progressions. Okay. So a lot of us, we've been talking about secondary progressions this whole time, but really there are 3 layers of progressions. And that's what we, in my course, I'm going to be teaching about. And my course isn't just me. I am also co-facilitating with Gray Crawford, who is a great friend of mine, an amazing astrologer. And
brilliant astrologer.
Brilliant.
And
astrologer. Great guy. And we basically, fell in love with these tertiary and minor progressions. We kind of found them at the same time and went down the wormhole together. Hence why we're teaching this course together, because we really got to investigate them as a team. So where we have the secondary progressions, like I said earlier, which is a day of life after birth is a year of life after birth. Tertiary progressions move faster. So that's a day after birth is a whole lunar month after birth. So it takes on more of a lunar quality versus a solar quality, like the secondary progressions do. And then there are minor progressions, which are basically one lunar month after birth equals 1 year of life. So that can sound like a lot to wrap your head around, and that's why we have software to help us calculate this. But really, you know, we think about symbolic time, and secondary progressions are about, you know, if you live to 90, it's 90 days after your birth. Tertiary progressions give us a whole 3 years after our birth of time that we can progress into different planetary cycles, a lot more lunar phases. You know, the outer planets move faster. There's more activity there. And then minor if we live a full life, we can live up to 6 years of symbolic time after our birth, which gives us a lot more to play with. So we're approaching tertiary and minors very much like we do secondary progressions, but they're giving us more to work with. They're giving us planetary action, lunar phases, you know, retrograde action, direct action at a faster speed that then can be paired with secondary progressions, because I like to look at them as nesting dolls. And why we're calling the course 3 measures of time is because there are, Robert Blatchke did a fantastic work on progressions, and he likened it to this idea that these 3 progressions are much like a clock. The secondary progressions are the hour hand, the tertiary is the minute hand, and the minor is the second hand. And so the clock, it's not just the hour, we need the minutes, we need the seconds. And so how is all that working together? Because in a tertiary charts are so valuable when we are in, say, a balsamic lunar phase in our secondary progress charts. Because that could be like 7 years of your life where you're closing down this big chapter of your life. And a lot of people are like, what is going on? What's happening to me? But you could be in a tertiary full moon at that time. And you can have a closing aspect happening, but also a blossoming where, everything you've worked for in the last couple of years is now culminating into something that doesn't feel like it's dying, or, and you're putting yourself out there. But we don't know that without the context of having these faster moving progressions. And that's, they're a secret sauce that a lot of astrologers don't maybe know of or use. And my goal is to spread the good word about these 2 other measures of time.
Yeah, it sounds really fascinating. Because with secondary progressions, like we were talking before we got on the call, that, paying attention to your progressed new moon and your progressed full moon, or first quarter square or last quarter square, it can be really significant. But as you said, those can be long periods of time, and life isn't all, I feel like it's cycles within cycles, like you said, like nesting dolls and things like that. And it could be true that you're in a larger cycle that is maybe coming to an end, or maybe just starting. But within that, there's still life. There's still things evolving. There's still things like growing and cycling. So yeah, that really fascinates me. I just had my progressed full moon and last year. And so, so my first thought was like, oh my God, does that mean another 7 years of on a downward spiral? So when you mentioned the tertiary thing, it got me really curious, because I want to know, like, what else is going, because it doesn't feel like, everything's behind me. I want to know where more potential and opportunity is.
Yes. And I think that's where tertiaries are so helpful, because we can time a lot of the like major changes that come to our lives through the tertiary lunar cycles, because they're setting up a period of time that a lunar cycle in tertiary can take us about two and a half years. Right? Like just 2.5 years in secondary progressions, the moon will move through just one sign. But in tertiary, you'll go through a whole cycle. They'll move through all the signs, and that new moon will take place in a particular house and sign in your chart. And there will be activity that's associated with that. So these are also things that we can really dive into and find, and understand like why we are focused on this one thing at this one time, right? When a great example in my minor progressions, when our course starts on April 18th, I'm having an exact full moon in my minor progressions that's on my natal, that's a reverse of my natal full moon I was born with in the 3rd and the 9th. And here I am teaching a class right at the time that the minor sun is in Capricorn on my natal moon, and the minor moon is in Cancer on my natal sun. And timing, right? We're back to timing, like literally to the day that this course starts. That's what's happening in my minor progressions. And minor progressions, that's about, they change over about every 13 months. So why am I teaching this course right now? Why are Gray and I coming together, right? You think about opposition being, kind of a partnership too. And it's just because it's the right time. And that's the beauty of progressions, is we get to understand the right time. Why do things happen when they happen? why am I feeling called to do this now? Why is the desire there? So, yeah.
So what kinds of things are you going to teach in the course? Give us sort of like an overview.
Yeah, so it'll be 5 weeks of the course where we're actually doing a pre-recorded videos for people to watch ahead of time. And then we meet on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific to all meet as a class and to go over the material. So it's not so much spending our live time, hearing us lecture or learning. It's like, no, you get to digest the information prior to that and then bring that to the class so that we can have, Q&A and discussion and really unpack each other's charts, because this is all going to be happening during, we start 2 days after that Aries new moon. That is like Aries central. It's like 6 planets in Aries, it's insane. So we're kind of treating this course a bit like self-exploration, where the goal is to learn these techniques, and then we're going to explore each other's charts and to look in the past, see where we are in the present, see what's coming, and learn that way. So the first week we're going to just be doing the breakdown, explaining what the progressions are, the different timing measures, theory behind it, but also the movement of like the sun and the angles. The second week, we're going to be diving deep into lunar phases on all 3 measures, which is going to be a meaty chart and something that I am very invested in all my client work. Yes, the lunar phases, where it's at. So we're going to be doing that on the second week. The third week, we're going to be talking about retrogradation, like retrogrades and stationary directs from all the planets. And oh my God, I have some examples that are insane, especially in the tertiary and minors, of like when things happen to people that like it's insane. So we'll be investigating that. The fourth week, we're going to be looking more at natal patterns and how progressions fall into activate those. Like the example I was talking about earlier with my partner and the moon Venus configuration in his chart, and then there's a progression could activate that. And then also something called holographic transits or progressions, basically when we have
a interesting.
Yeah. So when we have a situation where there's a repeat of something that we have natally, but it might not be contacting the natal situation, but it's still that same archetypal energy that's happening, and then how that plays in. And then the fifth week, we are doing transits. Transits come in last. And so then we're going to be throwing transits in there and showing how they can activate progressions at certain times and how to pay attention. And since there's certain planets too that just they have the same speed, like Saturn has about the same speed as a secondary progressed moon in the sky. So if you're a lucky person like me who has managed to link their secondary progressed moon up with transiting Saturn, then you experience that for a very long time. So we're going to be talking about stuff like that as well, which, you might not know that's going on until you get deep into progressions. And so, yes, now this is not a beginner course. I will just say, if you don't know a whole lot about astrology, or you're just like learning, your signs and you're getting acquainted with the natal chart, unfortunately, this is not the course for you. But if you got a pretty good grasp on astrology or cycles, really an intermediate level astrologer or astrology enthusiast and above would be perfect for this course.
Yeah. And also the software does most of the work for you, right? You just have to make sure you're if you have the software, Astro Gold. I love Astro Gold because it's pretty affordable, and it's got I think it has all the good stuff, but not too many bells and whistles like some of them do, where I get lost. But and then you can just sort of play around with those and then go deeper with, I guess with the content that Melissa and Gray will be teaching.
Yes. We're going to lead you into the wormhole or the rabbit hole and give you something to focus on. And then you get to put on your investigative hat and go down a deep dive with your own chart, with people that you know and love, or with celebrities if you want to. But it's not going to be everything thrown at you at once. We're going to focalize in particular areas and investigate there, and then basically share. So it's going to be very community oriented and collaborative, the experience, especially with our live classes, because there will be a lot of discussion and sharing.
And that is so valuable. I think those anecdotal things that you get from other people, learning astrology and other astrologers, that is a lot how you learn. Like I've heard a lot of people say things like, say, when the progressed ascendant gets to the midheaven, or these little things that you don't normally think to look at, that could be a major life-changing moment that you want to be aware of, that you want to keep your eyes out for. And then hearing other people say, I got my first car when, my progressed Mercury was, whatever, conjoined my Venus or something like that, so then to start looking for these things.
Yes.
Because this is just the kind of information that isn't widely available out there. It's like you have to really share the experience.
Yes. And that's what I keep saying about that, especially with tertiaries and minors, is there's not a whole lot of people, exploring and offering this information. So it is, it's very unique in that aspect of being able to dive into something that there's not a whole lot of books on it. There's not a whole lot of articles or YouTubes or, it's an unsung hero of astrological timing and prediction. And so I'm excited to be able to share that with folks.
Oh, great. What's the name of the course?
So the course is called 3 Measures of Time: Secondary, Tertiary, and Minor Progressions.
Oh, great. Okay. So you're going to be covering all 3 of those.
Yes, you get all three.
For the price of one.
The price of one. Yes, because they're meant to be used together. That's the thing, is a lot of us know, if a lot of people might know what secondary progressions are, but they don't use them. This could be a course that's great for you, because then you learn how to use those secondaries better. And then there could be some people that are like, I use my secondary progressions all the time. They're, great tool for me, but then I'm never using tertiary or minor. This is a great invitation for you as well, because now all of a sudden that secondary understanding is going to nest within these other things to look at. That's going to give a lot more information and food for thought. Powerful stuff.
I love it. I'm super tempted too. So those of you who are intrigued, check out the link in the show notes. And you can visit Melissa LaFara at energeticprinciples.com, and also on YouTube and Instagram and all the places, right?
All the places you can find. I have a course page there that goes over, who's this for? What will you learn? What will this look like? And so if you want to refresh, you can do that. Also our registration link, because we know it's hard times out there. So we have made this course in a sliding scale fee that's from a particular range to choose from, so that you pay based on your financial ability at this time. So we want to make it accessible to everyone. And if you want to check out my co-facilitator, Gray Crawford, you can find Gray Crawford. He's got a great YouTube channel, always putting things out, Patreon, over on Instagram. But Gray Crawford, I think his website's graycrawford.net. or Gray Crawford Astrology. I think it's graycrawfordastrology.net. Just Google Gray Crawford Astrologer and you will find all the things. But he's great.
Great. And I had him on the podcast at the turn of the year too. It was really great. We were talking all about AI Atlas and all kinds of crazy things.
So if you remember that episode, then you'll have a taste of Gray, who is very, very into he's a Pisces, bless his soul, and so very Pisces. Poetic, very wonderful writer, very into Greek myth, and he teaches a lot with Jason Hawley. So if you're a fan of Jason Hawley and his work, Gray leads trips to Greece with Jason Holly. They have one coming up later this year. Oh my God, I want to go on that.
I think October. I know.
So
we gotta make it happen. Melissa, we gotta manifest. Come on.
I know. Bring me to the island. Yeah. So yeah, we're a unique pairing together. So I'm excited to see how this course will unfold, given both what we bring to the table.
Well, great. So again, check out Melissa's website, Energetic Principles. Sign up for her course. You heard it here. It's the not to miss.
Don't miss it. We're probably not going to run it again, just to be honest. It's probably one of those situations where it's a one, one and done type of thing. So,
one live. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, if you're interested,
this is the time, pretty much.
This is it. Oh,
this is it.
Okay. I am tempted now. Thanks for that urgency. And I hope, Melissa, you'll come back at some point, maybe when you wrapped up the course, and we can talk more about dreams and astrology again. I have been dreaming fast and furious. They've just been coming at me every single night. So I can't wait till we can get together and start sharing our dreams again.
Yes, we do have to do that. There's so much to share. And so if you're interested in that, let us know.
We've got our, you can always submit a dream and your birth information, and we will be doing another episode on dreams and astrology upcoming. So stay tuned.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. So great to have you back. And I wish you the best of luck in your course and happy Aries season.
Yes, thank you. We lost her.